Hi, so I'm out here in sunny Southern California before I head up to Oregon in a little bit. And I wanted to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart. Um, I I've reconnected with my creative side over the past couple of years, really become aware that, you know, I'm a creative and had to really remind myself of that. Um, I was I was a creative that was more interested in the different ways to create. I loved experimenting with different types of creative mediums, and that was real confusing early on. I didn't know what my creative discipline would be, to the point where it kind of made me give up on being a creative. Um, and then eventually I found my way into sales and marketing and realized that marketing is just an accumulation of all creative outlets available, and figuring out how to, orchestrate that like, a maestro does with an orchestra. Um, and I really felt in my element for the first time ever, and I started to think really hard about the relationship between marketing, which is just, the most creative aspect of business that is not really considered a creative discipline. It's not really considered part of the creative industry. Marketing isn't really considered to be part of that creative industry, but yet marketing is like the creative aspect of business. And I really started to think long and hard about the relationship between marketing and creativity, in certain concepts that have been, taboo since about the time I was a child, such as copying and creative rights, like trying to figure out like what creative rights were. I wasn't really finding a a definition of creative rights other than copyrights, but that just didn't really seem like enough for me. It seemed difficult for me to understand how, when it was commonly understood that like artists and creatives are typically struggling financially, why the way for them to protect themselves would be to hire somebody else. It really bugged me that there was no way for creatives to protect themselves without hiring an attorney. Like, even in a digital age, it's like, for the first time ever, like, creatives could compete with marketers and distribute their content digitally for, no extra cost other than like an internet connection. They had unlimited ability to publish, but we still had to pay somebody else to protect our creative rights. And I really had to dig deep and like help myself define what creative rights were. So I had to do some thought exercises that I want to share with you. The first one is like a thought exercise about, you know, creative rights from historical ideas. So let's go way back to when people would, drill wells more often than they do now, and think about the first person to create a drill bit for drilling wells. And up until that time, people would charge, hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars in today's money, to dig a well. And they would have shovels and many men, and they would dig that well for people. And it was a service. And then somebody came out with a drill bit to drill for wells, and they were able to do it at a fraction of the price, but without men. And it was putting a lot of people out of work for the sake of, helping more people have water to drink. So at what point, like, who do we have sympathy for in this point? The people with the jobs, or households having access to clean, fresh water. And then, you had that competing industry. They automated the process. It was very efficient, very lucrative for them. And then somebody comes along and they have a way to manufacture those drill bits. So they do, and they sell them to anyone who has, a machine that can run the drill bit. And at that point, it wrecks that industry of essentially salesmen and marketers selling the automation of machines. It wrecks their industry, and they start to say, well, they're copying what we've done. Like they can't do this. They can't sell. Like, this is our whole business model is based on having control of this idea, having, ownership of these ideas. They can't do this. They can't sell this for a fraction of the price of our service, or else no one will use our business anymore. No one will come to our business anymore. And now, like, that's something where it's so far detached from who we are. It's like, if you could, if the difference between, having water for your family or not having water for your family was, essentially stealing the idea of, the well drilling company, would you do that? Even though they were saying that it was wrong, you were copying what they were doing, and it was bad, and it should be illegal, or it was illegal. Would you still do that so that your family would have water to drink? And then I started to expand this thought experiment from things that have existed. Those are theoretical, situations, but based on real life things that could have happened in the past, things that we know, real scenarios that happened, but told in a story that is, anecdotal in a way that makes us feel like, there's a time and a place for things to be copied. Just like we know it's not stealing when people copy a bicycle and make a bicycle for themselves, or when people make a guitar for themselves, or a ship or an airplane, and they make those things. It's not copying. They're not copying Boeing. They're not copying, Carnival Cruise Lines. They're not copying those things. And you start to wonder, it's like, is it the business model that is the creative rights, or is it the ability to have original creative ideas and bring them to market, or those creative rights? And these are the things that are very, very important to ask. So let's talk about something that can exist, like hasn't existed yet. So let's talk about the idea of, let's say somebody figured out a way to automate the process of building homes to the point where, through abstraction, they were able to create an app that competes with the buying and selling of built homes, where you could build a home for a fraction of the price of buying a home. At this point, like, maybe you could build a home for half or a third of the price of buying one, but like, I'm talking about maybe a 10th or a 20th of the price. Like, it figured out a way to automate, the contractors, all those connections with the government to get the permits for the land and the construction and all of that. Let's say you could build a home through this app for like $20,000 said and done, as opposed to buying a home on a market where you can, almost nowhere in the country can you buy a home for that much, but you could build a home for that much anywhere, even in the most expensive markets in the world. Would you go the route of, buying from a real estate agent, or would you use this app to build your custom dream home for a fraction of the price of any home on the market? What if the real estate agents and brokers were saying, this is this is infringing on our intellectual property. This is destroying our business model. Like, this should be illegal. Like, people should not have this kind of acts. They're like giving away homes. Like, this is going to put millions of real estate agents out of work. Like, this is going to kill the jobs of millions of real estate agents. Would you care if you could get your dream home for $10,000, $20,000 with this app anywhere in the world? As opposed, like, would you care that it hurts the business model of real estate agents? Would you care if Warren Buffett was saying, like, this kills my business model? Would you care? So as a creative, I started to think, like, what is creative rights? What are creative rights? And what are copyrights? And I stumbled onto something about a year ago, something called Creative Commons. Now, Creative Commons are pretty interesting. And what Creative Commons are everything that we think copyrights are as creatives and the effort of protecting creative rights, but it's free to get online. Like, it's so simple and easy to use that anyone, even a child, could set up Creative Commons. You don't need a lawyer, you don't need a law degree, yet they're legally binding in protecting creatives, their rights to collaborate. It helps them enable a collaborative rights protection for their creative content without having to necessarily charge everyone for every single little thing they do. It puts it in a way where people can essentially copy your stuff to share it and come to you to work on. You can arrange things in such a way where there doesn't always have to be money changing hands. If people want to promote your work, if people want to market your work, if people want to help you build your audience, if people want to help you, gain the attention you need to start performing or selling more art or like doing shows or, getting more gigs, or, whatever it is that you want more of, like, what if you could enable people to help you, even if there was no money that changes hands? And I started to understand that there's a business model of creative rights, and it's called copyrights. And this is something that even had marketers like me duped. It's a legal institution where it says that if any exchange of creative intellectual property takes place, there has to be a monetary exchange because they're a middleman. They're a middleman, just like the theoretical, like, anecdote about, the drill bit company that wanted to drill wells. Like, they were a middleman, just like, the real estate agents and the brokers are a middleman in that theoretical, futuristic scenario that I explained. And the lawyers are the middleman in the creative industry. And this is something I didn't see for a long time, even as a marketer. And the lawyers have not just the marketers sold, but the creatives sold. The creatives think that, copyrights are the only way to protect their ideas. And the same thing goes for patents as well. And you start to think, like, holy cow, like, if I don't have control over my creative rights, if my creative rights are objectified into a legal contract that's outside of me, then they can be bought and sold against my will, just like a hostile takeover of a company. Like, they can be acquired. They can be robbed from my family when I die. Like, there are so many things that are detrimental for copyrights because they are not to protect creative rights. They're to protect the rights of copy makers. That's it. People who care about the rights of copy makers, they are monopolists, plain and simple. Like 100% of the time. There is no exception to this. I've tried to find it. If you can find one, like I'd love to hear it. But like, monopolists hate competition. What do people who support copyrights and patents, what do they hate? They hate competition. They hate competition even in the form of unofficial collaboration. They hate promotion unless they're getting paid for you to promote their things. That is a monopolist ideal. Like, anyone who's like, I've tried to debate this from the other way like so many times, and what I found is like 100% of the time, there is no exception. Like, copyrights and patents are monopolistic. Like, they have the goal to have complete totalitarian control. No cooperation, no collaboration. And collaboration is key to creativity. If you don't leave the door open to collaboration for creativity, like open collaboration, you have innovation drought, you have writer's block, you have all these things. Like, if you don't have new ideas come in, if you don't have an entryway for a sandbox for new ideas to happen, that's monopolistic. If they believe that they should own your idea just because it resembles something that they have legal ownership of, that's monopolistic. That's it. And that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. But when I started to see that there are other options out there, like Creative Commons, that already exist, like, it was a lot easier for me to swallow that pill, to realize that other people, much smarter than me, much smarter than all of us, much smarter than the lawyers, much smarter than you, like, all of, like, they created these things years ago. And why don't we know more about Creative Commons? Because lawyers are really good salesmen. They have a really entrenched product where we believe that we need intellectual property as it was defined before the ability to have free marketing, viral shares, like all these things with the internet. Like, these things were established hundreds of years ago, and they don't work in the digital age for creatives to succeed. It's why creatives feel like they can put their ideas out there but still not get the attention like the people who, you know, are selling them on things like copyrights and like these middleman business models. Like, it keeps, the more we give into these middleman idea broker models, like the less control we have over our creative rights, because creative rights are understanding that sometimes we have to cooperate with people who are better at promoting, you know, our creative stuff, whether it's designs, whether it's technology, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's, you know, a movie idea, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a TV show idea. We have to collaborate with people who may not be as passionate about what we're doing, but they have more ability to promote it than we do. And at that point, like, why should we have to give up complete creative control to people to promote these things? But that's the way the current IP model that we were taught, like, doing anything other than this is stealing, and copying is stealing. I'm like, no, copying is not stealing. Like, it's not. If you build your own bicycle, you're not stealing from Schwinn. Like, if you're building your own computer, you're not stealing from, like, you know, Dell or Apple. Like, if you're building your own table and chairs, you're not stealing from IKEA. And yet we've been sold that when it comes to the realm of creative ideas, that if you don't have complete totalitarian monopolistic control of your idea, that you can't do on your own, which should be the first red flag. You can't do on your own unless you have an existing business model to fund it, and you have the ability to represent yourself in the courts, you're a lawyer. Then it's like, that's where I started to realize, like, how can I protect my creative rights if I have to give somebody else permission to protect my creative rights, where they have more control over my creative rights, because that protects their business interests. And then I started to realize that's why so many people would invent patents or, you know, create music under these business models like 50, 100 years ago, and then realize, like, oh, Mr. Edison owns all of my ideas. Oh, the record label owns all of my ideas. Oh, this tech company owns all of my ideas, and I have nothing to show for this. And you start to realize, like, that's what the idea of Creative Commons was originally founded to to fight. It's a nonprofit organization. I have no affiliation with it personally other than being a fan of how they've invested in creating a free technology, a free service that lets creatives keep control over their rights and have all the perks of what copyrights promise, but none of the pitfalls that trap up creatives on any level. And these are the sort of things where I'm like, it's cutting the middleman out of creative rights. And this is something that's really beautiful. So I'm really working to help people understand what options they have available from a marketer and, a startup business owner, like, to you, what is being a creative if not being a startup of one? Like, that's it. Like, whether or not you're an engineer, whether or not you're a software developer, whether or not you're a musician, whether or not you're an actor, a director, whether or not you're a producer, whether or not you're all of these things, if you don't know the best options available to you, it's really hard to protect yourself as a creative. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to share this information with creatives. I'm trying to pivot from marketing and sales to education, to use what I know about marketing and sales to help creatives educate themselves. So I hope you learned something. I know this was really disruptive for me and my beliefs. It was a lot to comprehend. It was a lot to take in. I mean, I had to get over the fact that I felt duped. I had to get over the fact that people that sounded like me were just trying to trick me. Like, I had to actually get in and figure these things out for myself, and it was really difficult. So I'm just trying to make it easier. I'm trying to point you into the right directions for you to prove this to yourself, because I don't want you to believe me, because that's never going to work. Like, I don't want to start up that kind of middleman thing where you trust me. I want you to figure out what I figured out. I want to point you in the directions that I wish I knew to look in from the beginning, and not just look in the directions that I'm telling you to look at and take it at that. Like, try and disprove it. Like, really try and prove this to yourself, because it's all out there. It's what I did. It's what I know you can do. Like, I know that if you look into this deeper and you try and disprove it, you'll come to the same conclusion that me and other creatives have come to, that we have more power than we're being led to believe. That all these, campaigns that I saw in the 90s and the early 2000s, that copying and stealing, like, I believe those hook, line, and sinker. And now I'm realizing I have way more power available to me, where I don't have to give up my creative rights on any level. And I can both distribute and retain that creative discretion of who I want to work with and who can help me in a way where I make sure that what I've already created is protected, and what I want to create will also be protected, and who I want to work with I will retain that ability, that autonomy to figure that stuff out for myself, protect myself from honest mistakes without having to give up that control to middlemen. And I just want to help as many people as possible. If you know other creatives that could benefit from this knowledge, if you share this with people, figure out whether or not I'm right or wrong. Try and figure that out. Debate this with yourself. Don't ask me to prove it to you when you can prove it to yourself. Because as long as I made this about me and what somebody else believed, I was entrenched in those beliefs that I feel like I didn't have much of a choice. I felt like that was the only option. I felt like that was the best option because it was the only option. And there's enough information out there to prove this to yourself over and over and over again. We just have to look a little bit more. And I want to put together these materials for people to better inform themselves, an education path on this, if you will. So if you're interested in that, put a comment below. Like, I'd love to put out like a free course for creatives to help themselves and maybe figure out a way to niche it up into other industries. So if you're a musician, if you're an actor, if you're a producer, like if you're an engineer, if you're a software developer, if you're a coder, like if you're an artist, if you're, a cartoonist, if you're an animator, whatever you are, like, and you want to help me figure out how to, talk to the people in your niche to distribute a course. Like, I'd love to work with you and collaborate with you to create a course specifically for your creative niche to help people understand how to retain their value as a creative, how to protect themselves, how to keep themselves safe, how to invest in themselves, other people, and not get burned, not get used, not get abused, not get taken advantage of because you trust the wrong person or because somebody's going through a hard time and they screw you over looking out for themselves and they sacrifice your rights in that process. Please, if you know a creative, if you care about creatives, please get the word out. Like, this is something that is very near and dear. If you care about creative rights, if you care about, creatives having a more lucrative future, having a more self-sustainable future, being less dependent on people who have proven time and time again to screw them over because, that's just the way the world works. It's not because, marketers like me are looking to screw people over. When times get tough, sometimes, it's not in our control anymore. And when your creative rights are outside of your control, when creatives' rights are outside of their control, sometimes shit happens. So protecting one's creative rights is like protecting your own body. You don't want to give that up to somebody else completely. Like, that's craziness. Like, that's how people used to get sold into slavery. So, like, let's rethink this. Like, there's better tools out there in the digital age now. Let's help raise awareness of this. Let's help spread the word. Let's collaborate, work together, figure out how to help more people. Thank you very much for this. Please join me in my Library of Consciousness, www.libraryofconsciousness.com. I talk about this and other things I research. That's my own free course of everything I've learned as, a self-learning ultra learner out there. So please, please, please reach out to me if you know somebody who could benefit from this. If it's you, if you want to collaborate, like if you want to just learn more, please join me at my Library of Consciousness at www.libraryofconsciousness.com. Check out my vlogs on YouTube. I think it's about time. You can find access to that in Library of Consciousness. That's a Facebook group. That's one of their social learning groups where we can discuss and learn together, share resources, and help ourselves, protect ourselves, and build a better future for creatives, creative rights, and our loved ones and friends that are creatives or have any sort of creative passions. And thank you.